Thanks a lot, everybody, for making the time for this session. We're going to be building on what we started in the first couple of sessions, right? So the first session, we installed OpenIAM in an RPM deployment. And the last session, we installed the LDAP connector, and we got it hooked to OpenLDAP. And we did a simple test where we were basically importing data from that OpenLDAP instance. Today, we're going to build on this, and we're going to go through some basic steps to be able to provision and deprovision users into a target system. So that, in our case, is going to be OpenLDAP, but these steps apply regardless of the target system that you're going to be using. So the flow of the session is kind of broken up into like the normal steps that we would follow, in terms of, being able to go through the application onboarding process and setting up user provisioning and deprovisioning, right? So this first slide kind of describes what those steps should be, and we did some of this last time. So the first step, obviously, we wanted to, install our connector. After that, we want to define a managed system. The managed system represents an endpoint that we integrate with. Then we want to import the existing entitlements which are in that application. And the reason for this is because in OpenIAM, we're eventually going to create an access control model, which is going to be a combination of application level roles and business roles. And those business roles are going to need to wrap around those application roles or the application entitlements that you may have to be able to determine who gets access to what. Right. So if we don't represent them in OpenIAM, it's kind of hard to achieve that particular goal. The next thing we want to do is be able to import the existing users and the entitlement membership. So meaning, if you're looking at an LDAP, it's going to be the group memberships. If it's an SAP, it might be roles. And it will vary, based on, but the point is you want to be able to kind of capture what each person is actually entitled to today. And there are several reasons why we need to do this. So one is we don't try to grant access that we already have, right? So that's the most obvious. Second is later on when you're looking at your IGA implementation and you want to start doing access requests and you want to do access certifications, then we need to know what somebody has access to. So we need to have a full picture of a person's access across the applications that they're allowed to work with. After that, we want to define some business roles. So your business roles are going to be, the higher level roles that, basically they're usually aligned to your job title. So let's say that, if you're a support engineer, what access should you have? And, it may be things like you need a mailbox, you need an Active Directory account, you earn an Azure account, we need access to the support system, and what level of access should you have? So since there are multiple systems, that business role should basically encapsulate all of those types of access. The next step are what we call business rules, or and this allows us to kind of define the birthright access. So this is kind of introducing context into when someone should be automatically given access to these business roles. Meaning, again, if we use the customer support engineer example, you could say, well, if the person's job title is customer support engineer and they are part of, a certain department or they're in a certain country, you take all of those things together and you say, well, based on that, you should get certain access, right? So the question is, do reverse entitlements exist? Michael, can you elaborate what you mean by that? Yeah. And then, so if we go further into this, the next part is going to be to actually have the actual synchronization task, right? So before we kind of go into those steps, if you can, so our goal is also to kind of help understand what the access control model looks like. And in OpenIAM, what we've done is kind of broken up the access control model into roles, groups, resources, and organizations. And all of these, they're really very similar. I mean, so like for example, the question that I got asked is, how is a role different from a group? So in terms of behavior, they really aren't. They're just done that way so that it's easier to understand and easier to represent things. Now, we took things a step further where each one of these objects, users, the roles, groups, resources, and organizations can have a metadata type. The metadata type allows us to create new types of objects. So for example, in OpenIAM, we have an object called a group. But in AD, we have AD groups, and in a Linux system, we have groups there. Um, in SAP, we have roles. So each one of those types of objects has a few more attributes and a few more things associated with it than the OpenIAM group does. So the idea is that we want to be able to create or use terms which are closely aligned to the business and it's easier to work with. Okay. So going back to the question is, so if the user exists in an endpoint, if we do the reverse sync, uh, it it comes with the user comes to OpenIAM as an identity. So what the question here is, okay, let's say that we have an existing Active Directory, and we're going to pull in all the users which are within that AD or maybe a subset, and we have all the group memberships that we're going to represent, but we're also going to bring in the identity information that's there. So for example, um, let's say that in OpenIAM my username is Sunit.Shah, but in AD it could be S.Shah. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to, when I pull them in, be able to see that this is my AD account, what the status of that account is, when it was created, and what group memberships I have. I may also want to put in other information like, when was the last time that I logged in, or when was the last update, because I may use that information to make other decisions on whether this account is active or not, right? So, um, other behaviors about these about the access control model is the ability to kind of inherit access. And this is true for all of these objects, but we really use it largely more for roles. And in the next slide, we kind of show you what I mean by that. Resources are used a little bit differently than other objects in OpenIAM. Resources are really used to kind of represent, a variety of things. So for example, we created a managed system last time. The managed system is a special type of resource, right? It's something that allows you to kind of be able to write something to it, right? But we can also have URLs, we can have buttons on a screen, fields on a screen. A resource could represent, a laptop. It could represent a badge. So you can create a resource for whatever you like, and then introduce that into the access control model. Okay. So going back to the metadata types, so this is kind of building on this a little bit more, and what we're basically saying is that let's say we have an example of a user, right? There are two types of users: internal users and external users. And okay, so there's a question going back to resource. So how is managed system related to a resource? So think about it this way: that a managed system is really a special type of resource, meaning that if you were to give it a new metadata type, call it a managed system, that's basically what that resource is. And the reason why we did it that way is that we can have that fit into the access control model. So meaning if I want to determine who is allowed to get access to a certain type of resource, but if I have this explosion of types of objects, it becomes kind of a little bit messy to work with. So this is why we kind of kept these objects down to a limited number, and we have the ability to kind of subclass them into different types of objects, right? So really from an access control person, um, So do we have a connector for any resource? And and the answer is yes. Every single managed system that we have, especially the automated managed systems, there will be a connector associated with it, right? And the connector in this case is kind of helping. It's the way that we talk to that target system, right? So for example, if we have LDAP, the LDAP connector allows us to kind of, send information to LDAP, right? Going back to, our slide here. So we have two types of users, right? Internal and external, and there can be more. Like there be contractors, they could be vendors, part-time workers, students, employees, whatever have you. And each one of them may have some different attributes associated with them. So basically what we can do is we can create a metadata type for each type of user, and then use the metadata elements to define the custom attributes that go within them. And you don't really have to do this, but the reason I kind of recommend doing this is because it gives you a little bit of structure. So you know that, what every single attribute that you're going to be using in a certain type of object, that it's well defined, right? The system is flexible enough that you can do this on the fly. You can give, custom attributes to any object you want to, and that's fine. But you'll find that as the system evolves, that it will become less than ideal, right? To kind of do it that way. Okay. So the next kind of slide kind of talks a little bit of how we can do inheritance. And more often than not, this topic of inheritance, even though it's supported with, say, groups as well, it really comes in with roles. And it's just because of how people see role definitions. So in this example, think about that there's a base role, it's called developer, and they have access to Jira and they have access to Active Directory, and in AD, they have a group membership called developer, right? Now I can create two new roles, from that call, let's say a .NET developer and a Java developer. The Java developer has nothing more added to it. It's just there for, to be complete. And the .NET developer is adding access to a Windows server and a SQL server. And in the SQL Server, it has DB owner role, right? But it's inheriting Jira and AD from the top level role, right? So in this way, we can kind of build out a role hierarchy. I would recommend not creating a really huge hierarchy, because it can the same reasons why we don't do that when we're writing code. You probably don't want to do that here as well, right? So keep, I would keep that hierarchy, fairly shallow, for the most part. Okay. So related to this are also access rights. So basically what this is saying is, let's say that I have a role called developer, and it has access to a Windows server and a file share on it. The access rights allow us to say, well, what can I do there? Am I allowed to, read, write, execute, things, delete things? So in this case, it's saying that I only have read, write access. Now, this is fine. This is really, really basic. Every access control model allows you to do this. Where we made this a little bit more flexible is that the access rights themselves, you can define your own. And the reason this is helpful is because different systems have different, terminology that we need to adapt to. So for example, when we're working with customers in banking and we need to integrate with their loan, loan systems, they have credit limits on what different roles are allowed to sign off on. So these access rights could say things like, I can approve up to $10,000. Another one could be I can approve, say, up to $50,000, right? So those don't have any meaning in OpenIAM itself, but when we are, creating accounts in the loan system and we can set these values, it does have meaning over there, right? And plus, when we do the access reviews and the certifications, we can have a full picture of what is actually allowed or not allowed. So tying all of this together are business rules. So business rules, like I said earlier, they give you context. So, in the example that we have on the screen, again, we're using customer service. So we're saying if you're in an organization and your job title, when both of those things match, you get a certain target. Okay. So at this point, let's shift over to more of a demo and kind of walk through some of these examples. Okay. So I'm going to log into the admin console because I just want to kind of review a few things that we've configured already. Okay, so first thing that we did, we did this last time. We deployed, the LDAP connector. Um, we've kind of built this out a little bit more. We have a few more connections, and so you'll see that some things are in green and some things are red. So red means that the connection's broken, and it will trigger off an alert, and green means that the connection is active. Right? Um, the once this is done, the next part. So I'm purposely not getting deep into the whole scripting part of it today. We're going to get into that next time. And the reason being is that I want to kind of explain how the concepts and how everything fits together first, and then we can get into the scripting because otherwise it will just kind of take you down a different path. Okay. So once we have our connection in place, next thing we did was we ran synchronization, right? So we kind of pulled, data in. And so we can use, some of the existing ones, right? So if we look at, say, for example, in AD, we have, um, okay. So there's a question here if, do we have in the roadmap, the Italian language? The market in Italy is growing, and the option could be to facilitate for Italian customers. So we've been actually adding language packs to the product, over the last year. So if you've noticed, we probably added things like Danish and support for German and Spanish has been there for a long time. So all we really need to do is take the language pack and localize it. So, we can certainly do that, and we can take that conversation, offline and kind of put together, a timeline. We'll probably need to find someone who can localize it for us, and then we can, maintain support for Italian going forward. Yeah. Okay, so going back to this, so in this case, let's see, I'm using AD as an example. So I've got a synchronization task for role, for groups, and for organizations. And so if I look at the group task, uh, it will tell you which the connector is. I should open up the wrong one. Sorry about that. Okay. Um, Main thing here, synchronize object is group, right? And then I have a script here which is going to do that. And so once this is done, then we can do the same thing for our users, right? And this will, bring every. Another thing that we'll also be doing is the scripts that we develop, both for LDAP and for AD. We will be publishing all the slides and the scripts that go with it. So at the end of this, you should have a fairly complete example that you can leverage and build on. The scripts will be fairly well documented so that they can be used, to kind of learn and get a better idea of what we're trying to do. You know. Okay, so once we've brought this in, so for example, if we were to go to our group screen here, and we were to filter by, say, for example, AD PowerShell, we'll see all the groups that have been imported in, right? And the same thing for, let's say pick another environment, let's say SAP, it's probably not a good idea. Um, I think there's an AWS in here somewhere. So these are some group memberships from AWS. Now AWS also has roles. So if you look over on that side, you'll see them there as well. Um, So the question is it the same script for LDAP and for AD? Because I started with AD. Um, the scripts are very, very similar, but I'm going to publish both because with OpenLDAP in particular, there are a couple of nuances in terms of the order, in terms of that we sync. The way that they do the group memberships is a little bit different, but in reality, except for that ordering, the only thing that you need to really change are the attribute names, but regardless, we'll publish both so that you'll have a valid example for OpenLDAP and for AD that you can use, you know. But the concepts are exactly the same. And in fact, the concepts are exactly the same, even if you were to use if you were connecting to an ERP system like say SAP or to an API or to a relational database. The concepts will not change. Okay? So once we have this, the next part is to go ahead and to create a role, right? So let's create a business role and we'll create, a very simple, role. Now, sorry, I'm going to go back for a second. These classifications that you see here, the AWS policy and AWS roles, these are all basically the metadata types of roles that we've created simply to be able to represent the roles a little bit better. Okay. Um, the question is, where can we see users, roles, groups if we run a sync script from LDAP, just like AD we have on Windows Server? So the place to see the users, roles, and groups, if we run a sync, is going to be in exactly the same place. So just like we were looking at groups and the role list, you'll see them there, and users, you can see them in the user manager. We'll get to that in a second. Okay. So let's say we're going to create a business role, and let's give it a default password policy, and let's say call this a test webinar role, right? Now here I can assign this to let's say we're going to give this open LDAP, for example, right? And these are just basically descriptive values. The role status indicates it active or not. A couple of values here. These are things that you can define. For example, the max user number. Sometimes you may not want to have more than a certain number of people in a role. There might be license limits or some of the criteria that kind of dictate why you may want to keep this number to a fixed. So this allows you to control that. Default membership duration. This often for like privileged access, you may want to say, well, I'm only going to let you have access for say 30 days or some period of time because this type of access is considered sensitive. There may also be business reasons where there's commercial models around this where you want to limit how long someone can have access, right? So this a simple way of kind of defining how long you can have access, and this applies to anybody who access or requests this role, right? So it's not a one-off. The role parent, this is where if I'm going to inherit, behavior, I can pick, so let's say I want to inherit from the help desk role, right? And it will take behavior that I have from there. The role owner and admin, could be a user or a group, and this is really used for the workflow. So when we get next week or so, when we get to the access request functionality, these two attributes will come into play. So once we create our role, the next part is that we can define role entitlements, like meaning what can this role really do? So we'll see that Open LDAP has been added. And let's say we add one more to this. Let's say we have, we're going to filter by managed system. And let's say we want, let's say we want AD. So now we have two applications in this role. Maybe we throw in a third. And let's say this one's going to be SAP for argument's sake, right? So at this point, becoming a member or test webinar role will give us an account in OpenLDAP, AD, and in SAP. But it's not giving us any privileges, right? So it's an account in those systems that does nothing. So let's now add some additional behavior. And let's say, again, this is going to be AD. And I want maybe domain, um, let's say I want domain admin rights, right? And then maybe I want, so I can build this out further in this way to kind of show the different types of access they have, right? The question is, in which order will the identities be provisioned? So it's a good question. If you, in defining what I'm defining here, there really is no order, because what I'm basically saying is that any one of these can happen, at any time. And within OpenIAM, it's an asynchronous process. So these messages will get sent, and each one of them will get created. However, there are times where you will need to control the order. So let's say, for example, and this happens quite a bit, let's say you have AD and you have Exchange, and the mailbox creation in Exchange is dependent um, on the account in AD occurring existing first. And on top of that, um, maybe the customer wants to have Exchange as being authoritative for the email address. So meaning that the IAM system is not going to generate the email address, Exchange will generate it, right? So what we can do is in that managed system, there is a place where we can kind of draw this relationship. So I've already created this role, so I'm going to get out of this for a second. I'm going to go back to managed system and answer that question. So let's say we have well, there's my AD connector right here, right? And there is this field down here called downstream managed system. And what this means is that which applications come after this one. So if I have, let's say, Exchange, for example, right? This means that even though if I had Exchange on my list on the role definition, when the system sees this order, it's going to create that AD account first, and then it's going to go to Exchange, right? So if you need to create this kind of control of what happens before the other, you can use downstream association to kind of create this kind of ordering. Okay, so we've created so far a role. We've created all the infrastructure that we need at this point, right? Okay, there's one more question. Um, what about including, okay, so it says, can this support secondary accounts in the same resource, entitling someone to 80? So, okay, um, what you're really after is that you want a primary account, and then you want a secondary account, like your admin account or maybe a service account, which is related to this. So there is a way to do this. I need to, I'll come back to you with an example of exactly how we should implement that. Normally what we do is, especially if it's the same resource, we kind of have a little workaround, which is that we have a second managed system, which becomes your admin managed system. So basically your admin accounts would go, um, you would, in your role definition, you would say, here's my user account. And by the way, here's a second managed system called, and again, it's mapped to the same AD, but a message will get sent there. And that actually works out okay, because the admin account, they're going to be a little bit different. The naming of the admin account is going to be different. Like maybe I may have like an underscore or something that says it's an admin account. It will have different privileges, right? And plus, when we create the relationship with the user, you may want to have that as a related account, right? So you can kind of keep track of these. Right? So there's another question that's saying, what about including a delay? So you want to have, okay, so basically you're trying to have a delay between the first account. I'll come back to you with an example for that. There is a way to kind of add that delay in, and we've had to do that in the past. And that delay happens really when the time that Exchange takes to kind of generate that mailbox, and we need to take that and then push it back into both the IAM system and as well as the downstream systems as well, right? Okay. So let's say, okay, we have this. The next part is we want to create business rules. So when you create business rules, there's two parts to it. There is the criteria or the context, and then there's the target. So let's go ahead and create a target first. I'm kind of doing this backwards, but it will be a little bit better flow, I think, from you guys being able to follow this, right? So let's say you know the target is senior, and this is active, and I'm going to go and find my target here. Okay, so I find a target, and I'm going to add to this. So I'm going to say I want to add this person to a group, and again I'm going to use AD. And whatever, we'll just pick any old group name, right? And it could be several things that we pick here. And so we have that. Maybe this person also needs access to we want to define the org units, right? Maybe where we're going to create them. And so like maybe it's a department, and let's say they're in customer service, right? So and this way we can keep building this out, right? So we can, um, from here, we can, change statuses, we can initiate workflows, we can lock an account, we can remove. There's various things that we can do here, and the goal is to be able to configure these things and not have to write scripting for it, right? So now that I have my target defined, now I'm going to create the rule. And I'm going to call the rule the same thing here. I'm going to call it a system, Okay, and I'm going to say this is going to work for both adding and updating accounts. I'm going to say this is active, and the target name is going to be, here. And I'm also going to use the same one here, and I'll explain this in a second. So let's say the conditions are, let's say I want to make this an and I want to add an expression. So the first one, it's going to be, let's say, job title, and let's say it contains the word customer service. So this way, if there are other roles which, other job titles which have the word customer service in, I want to use the same target. And now let's see, I want to add one more expression to this. And let's say that if the, the organization matches, customer service as well, right? So, okay, what did I do? All right, blew myself up. 1 second. Let's see if we can get there quicker. And okay. So let's start with that. Let's see if I can save that. And if all right, okay. I'm making mistakes here. I'm not going to keep beating this one to death. But okay, so there's a question here that says, is the possibility of mass loading business rules on the roadmap? It is, and so this is an excellent question. Um, so when we added business rules, people liked it because it made things easier to be able to configure. Then the next thing was, well, you know, you can have thousands of rules, and it's a lot of work to be able to create them. So um, in the upcoming release, what we'll have are two things. One is to be able to bulk load business rules so that you don't have to create them from the UI. You can also create them from the API if you wanted to, but also tools to be able to import and export. So let's say you have a dev, a UAT, and a production environment. And let's say you have 3,000 rules, which is not unrealistic. And in this case, you want to be able to take those changes and be able to promote them. And you'll be able to do it in two ways. One is you'll be able to export them out and import them, or you'll be able to go from the UI, tell it where your non-prod your UAT environment is and the time, and be able to promote those changes over there, right? And the question is, if duplicate entries are generated in AD via any of the applications, the connector will typically respond by flagging the duplicate for review or attempt to merge them automatically. Um, if you have duplicate entries, so the duplication, I'm assuming that the identity itself won't be a duplicate because I don't think AD will let you do that. Um, but it's not going to merge them for sure. At least not in AD, it won't. What you want to do is make sure that if you have two, when you're bringing them into OpenIAM and they have, if we don't want to, well, if you have the same employee ID or same matching attribute in OpenIAM, it will merge them into one. So that will happen, unless you have some other criteria that you can differentiate that they're not. If to see them as duplicates, again, there would need to be something in the synchronization script to be able to detect that they are, right? There's another question is if we want to auto-populate values into specific fields when a group is created, can we use the business rules or auto-populate them? Um, Unfortunately not. So I think that I think I know where this question is about in the background to this. So if you have the business rules are good for assigning membership to a group or a role. They're good at changing statuses. They're good at triggering actions and what to happen when events occur. They're not really the best thing for, say, pre-populating or updating values. Um, there might be other places like within Groovy scripts and either in the workflows or in a scheduled task that we can look at and see how best we want to be able to kind of handle this. But we can discuss that one offline as well. I know what this is related to, and we can kind of go deeper into that. Okay. And okay, the question is, how does impacted user and provisioning functions, which are available at the bottom of the business rules? Good question. Okay, so down below, let's say um, let's say I have a system which I have a fair number of users in it, I have some rules created, and let's say I go ahead and make a rule change. That preview impacted users is going to tell me the number of users that are going to get changed. And so the the idea is that if I'm going to make a change that's going to go touch 10,000 users, I will get an idea of that from that, right? So this is it's giving me a warning that's saying the level of damage am I going to potentially do by making this change. Now, if I'm still okay with that, the provision impacted user says, go ahead and apply this change to these existing users, right? So it will, let's say you're, adding something to a new group membership and you have existing people who need it. And so this will go ahead and basically update them, right? Okay. So next part is since we've kind of gone through the rule definition, we're going to go through, do a basic a simple example. So I created a very simple CSV file, and it has a couple of users, my email address. They're both active and an employee ID. One's an employee and another one's a contractor. And so I'm going to go to the synchronization, and I'm going to basically use a CSV sync to upload this. Now, um, so here we're using the CSV adapter, so there's no connector that's defined, and the managed system is OpenIAM. That's going to be the default, and the object is users that I'm bringing in. And I'm also going to do a complete sync. Now, in real life, you wouldn't do it this way. In real life, you would never manually want to do this every single day. It's defeats the whole purpose of the system, right? So if we're working with a CSV file and not talking to our target system, there is a process that you can turn on in OpenIAM, which will go out to your network drive. It will look for that file at regular intervals, and it will take it when it finds it, and it will attach it to the synchronization process, and then it will run, right? If you wanted, you can also take that CSV file and you can move it to another folder and tell it that, okay, this one's been processed already. Okay, so here I'm just going to go ahead and load this, and I'm going to go ahead and do a sync now, and it's going to go ahead and start to process that file. And it will take a few seconds, and I'll probably hear my email go off in a second, letting me know it's there. And okay, so if I take um, one of those users, let's say if I take the contractor, I'm going to take a look at use their employee, their unique ID. So this is George. I'm going to bring them up, and I'm going to see, let's go to classic view, and then there's the user identities that were created. And so all of this is coming from the business rules. So if I look at user entitlements, I'll see everything that those rules. So they gave me a Linux account, an account on Azure, on AWS, the various policies, and so on and so forth, right? And you'll see that the start date is today, and this is when this activity occurred. So if I go into the log viewer, I should see everything that the system did. So this was me attaching the file. This is the synchronization being run. And you see that there are two records in the sync, and if I open them up, it's going to go through the various low-level activities that are done. So a lot of this, you don't need it for audit information, right? Not at least not from to be able to manage the compliance activities. But these activities, these details do help us when we're troubleshooting problems. So having a bit more detail here, can certainly help. So for example, if I were to look at these records, it will tell me, for this thread, there were two records, right? It broke them up. And if I go deeper into that, it will tell me, what was the record that came in. And then it will go through everything, down here as well, right? There's a question that says, is it possible to show a Groovy script execution based on a business rule, and what can be achieved? Um, I actually have an example related to this, and I will share it next time because we went through this at a customer where um, they wanted flexibility where they wanted to be able to manage group assignments based on certain parameters which were there. and to have to create um, the business rules for every one of those scenarios, it would have caused an explosion of business rules, and it was just harder to maintain. It kind of defeat the whole purpose of having them. So what we did was we had a rule that has the context, and it calls a script, a simple script, and I will share that script, next time as well, and we'll upload it as part of the examples, for today. Okay. Um, Another question is how can you provision the business rules to existing users who already have rules? So the rules are not roles. Okay, so a person would never really have a rule. They would have the result of that rule, meaning that if certain conditions were true, then apply, these various entitlements or accounts to them, right? So if you were to change a rule which would cause a trigger there, right, then those users would be updated. You know, if you have existing users and you're trying to modify them, business rules may not be the right way to go unless it was really a well-defined, case. You could use the bulk management tools instead, but again, it may be helpful to know a little bit more detail about what you're trying to do, and we can have a separate call around that. Okay. There's another question that says, what happens if we give the start date and end date in the past? Um, Good question. I would say you should probably fix the bug in your code. That'd probably be the easiest thing to do. I'd have to check to see that the system will allow us to do it. If it's in a script, it may, because the idea of the scripts is that there might be a specific condition that we're trying to work around, right? Sometimes we find that if we make things overly rigid, that there are real life use cases that come up and it puts us into a little bit of a pickle, and it's kind of hard to work out of, right? And this other question, is there a way to read changes from the synchronization process? I'm not really following what you mean by read changes from the synchronization process. Do you want a report that shows what the synchronization process did? Meaning like, new people that it created, people that modified or terminated? If so, there is a report for that, and synchronization we can configure it so that it can automatically send out that type of a script, right? Next question is, OpenIAM can be a user directory by itself, or should it be connected to LDAP or AD? It's a good question. So I guess the question for me, my answer depends on really how we are going to define a user directory. If you're thinking of a directory from um, a a complete repository where you have all your user information, then yes, OpenIAM can act like a user directory because it is keeping a complete picture of everything that all the people you work with and what they can do. If the definition is of a directory is an actual directory, meaning like an LDAP or an AD, then no, because we really don't support an LDAP protocol, and we're not truly a LDAP in that way, right? So it depends on what you're after. If it's just, completeness of information, then sure, we can do it. What will happen when you disable the business role after the user has been assigned? So if you disable the role, it's not going to ripple through. And I think that was actually done by design, where if you make something inactive, because roles can also have a life, meaning that you can have a role which was active at a moment in time, and you may want to make it inactive after a certain period of time. I think it would be very destructive if we, basically if we disabled it and we revoked all that access. If you, I think if we want to do that, I think we can explicitly do that, which is, have a scheduled task that will look at role status changes, and if they have been, disabled or made inactive, then to remove that access as well, right? So, but I don't think the system's going to explicitly go out and do that. I think just because of the negative impact that it could have. mean, just think of like, an admin making a mistake and just say clicking on a disable button, and next thing you know is like people start losing access all over the place, right? Um, okay, next question is how to enable email notifications to custom group if a user has been imported from a CSV file. So HR team adds a new user to the HR department. I am going to cover that in the next session when we talk about the scripting in general and how we set them up. I will also go over how to set up the SMTP gateway in that session as well. Okay. The final question is the delta changes, meaning that what was changed on the target system respect to the last synchronization process done by OpenIAM. So it's a good question. So there are two ways that we can can detect those, and I'm assuming what you're looking for is, let's say, OpenIAM wrote some things in, say, OpenLDAP or AD, and then somebody made a change in AD or LDAP directly, and you want to be able to import, you want to know what changed and be able to, capture that. So on one hand, an easy way of doing that is you can have a synchronization task that can look at LDAP and say, look at the last changed attribute, right? And from there, you can have, an incremental sync that will bring that data back to OpenIAM. There is a reconciliation process, which is more of a more extensive bidirectional comparison, where you can say, well, what changed and what behavior do I want to change? We will look at that, and not in the next session, but the session after that, when we get more into the reconciliation part. Hey, so thank you everybody for all your questions. Hopefully this was helpful, and that's all for our session today, and we'll catch up with you next time. Thanks again for making the time.